Tammy Bruce, Richard Fowler, Jesse Waters, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. President Trump hitting the campaign trail in Ohio over the weekend and predicting a possible red wave in the midterms. This comes ahead of a hotly contested special election in the Buckeye State's 12th district tomorrow.
They're talking about this blue wave. I don't think so. You win and you're a little complacent, but I mean, that was 2 years ago. So I just said, why? But we have the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have things that have never happened before. And look, if the Democrats get in, they're going to raise your taxes. You're going to have crime all over the place. You're going to have people pouring across the border. So why would that be a blue wave? I think it could be a red wave.
The economy is a big plus for the president. The 3.9% unemployment rate is the lowest for a July of a midterm year since 1966. Meanwhile, Democrats are taking a different approach. Senator Kamala Harris is speaking out against the use of this political phrase.
I have a problem, guys, with that phrase, identity politics. Because let's be clear. When people say that, it's a pejorative. That phrase is used to divide and it is used to distract. Its purpose is to minimize and marginalize issues that impact all of us. It is used to try and shut us up.
All right, Greg, I'm going to have to go to you on that because you talk a lot about identity politics and now that helps divide the country. And she's saying it's actually, if you say that, then you're being divisive.
Well, that was a very powerful, I mean, if you agree with her, she's very persuasive. I have to say she's a strong speaker. I do disagree with everything she's saying, but I have to say that the way she said it was pretty strong. Identity politics used to be a rallying cry for the left. It was a positive thing. Now when you mention it, it's an insult.
Right.
And the reason is because ultimately the consequences of identity politics is putting the group before the individual. And what happens is everybody who are in their specific groups then have to feel that their group is somehow more important than the other group. So what you end up having are warring factions. And you're seeing it a lot of times where one group accuses another group of cultural appropriation, and then another group accuses that group of something else. Ultimately, it's going to turn on itself. This is why Trump won, was because he was talking about one identity politic, which was American. Now, then you have the left saying, no, that's racist, because what you're really saying is white when you're talking about America. That's the consequence of identity politics, is what they're saying is that if you are white, you are part of the oppressor group. And it's the identity, and so when you say identity politics, you're obviously racist. So that's, nothing good can come from identity politics, because in its heart, it's about division.
Tammy, welcome to The Five.
Thank you. Pleasure
it was
to be here.
quite a different message, right? So President Trump's at a rally. That's a different scene for him. He loves it. He's into the crowd. Can you contrast that with Kamala Harris, who was giving a speech at Netroots Nation? What do you think about the way that they're both setting things up?
Well, her attempt to retreat from identity politics, which they've relied on for decades, tells you that they've noticed it's not working. They've seen something internally that tells them, we've got to stop this. And actually, an Independent Women's Voice, which on the President and McLaughlin survey, shows that 85% of people don't care, as an example, about gender. They're not going to base their vote on gender. And yet that's what all of 2016 was, really. Vote for Hillary, it'll be the first woman president. Or vote for this person, it'll be the first of this thing or the other thing. Americans are not caring because they've realized that that's false. It doesn't work. So her position is, well, this is now not working. We've relied on this. Let's retreat a bit. The president just being consistent. It was what the campaign was. We're all in this together. The numbers prove that's correct. All of the unemployment numbers we know, of course, are extraordinary now. That everyone's boat has been lifted. It's the thing that he promised. And it's based on all of us actually not seeing each other differently, but seeing each other as a neighbor. That's what resonates with the American people, and that's why it's working.
Richard, I imagine you disagree. I'll give you the floor. You can tell us why.
Don't give him the floor. Just give him the table.
Okay, the table.
I'll take the floor and the table for $200, Alex. So here's my take on this. So here's what I think what Senator Harris was trying to say there, and she said it very eloquently, is this. When you fix an issue that's, for example, plaguing the African-American community, you help all Americans. When you properly fund public education, you help all Americans. When you fix our broken immigration system, you help all Americans. When you make sure that everybody has the right to vote vote without disenfranchisement, you help all Americans. So it's not identity politics. Make sure that America works for everybody, no matter their color, no matter their race, no matter their sexuality, no matter their zip code. And I think that's the fight that Democrats are having.
Don't you think that's but
sounds
how
like
does
Donald
that,
Trump?
Yeah, I was going to say.
No, I think it's completely different from Donald Trump. I think what we have in the White House is a president who won't even acknowledge that Pride Month is a thing, and we're still fighting for LGBTQ rights, right? You have a president in the White House
who also accepted gay marriage before Obama did.
But you also have a president in the White House who gets in fights with NFL players or gets in fights with LeBron James because he opened up a school.
He also gets in fights with Hillary Clinton. He gets in fights with everybody. He gets in fights with Rosie O'Donnell.
That doesn't hurt any particular group if he's fighting with somebody.
Well, I think if you talk to the African American community, they would say when you pick on LeBron James for opening a school in Akron, Ohio, you're picking on the entire African American community.
And he didn't pick on him because he opened up a school. He picked on him because LeBron James picked on Donald Trump, and he does that with everybody.
And also, it was to make fun of Don Lemon. It was about Don Lemon.
He's supposed to be above this.
Well,
he's the leader of the free world.
We know Trump doesn't take the high road. He gets in the dirt and he fights it out.
Just say it.
Okay, but you should be used to it. It's 2 years going on 8. So I think the identity politics thing is they're looking for differences, as Tammy said, instead of everything that unites us. And the Democratic Party, they have coalitions. And they group these coalitions together for electoral victories based on their identity. And what they do is they have these groups, and they say, these groups have grievances. And we are going to correct those grievances. We are going to right those wrongs or right those injustices. And we're going to take and use the government to do that by redistributing wealth and benefits. But what they do is they say everything that's wrong, that's plaguing these identity groups, is the fault of Republicans. It's not the group's fault. It's not the economy's fault. It's not something that has nothing to do with Republicans. It's all the Republicans' fault. So they demonize the Republicans and create a war. There's a war on women. There's a war on minorities. There's a war on Muslims. And a lot of Republicans don't go out every day and wake up, eat breakfast, and say, how can I wage war on other people in this country? They go to work, they get their money, and they don't want the government to keep all of it. That's all.
Can I play a couple of pieces of sound for you and control room? I'm going to ask you to play these thoughts back to back. One is a Senate candidate, Republican Senate candidate in Michigan. That primary election is tomorrow. And the other is from, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was in the same state of Michigan campaigning for somebody else over the weekend.
I don't have a black message. I don't have a white message. I have a red, white, and blue message. I have a message of everybody achieving the American dream.
We can say that a Muslim man can be the first governor, that can be the first Muslim governor in this country, in the Midwest. And we don't have to be afraid of some other that won't vote for him, because we know that 10 years ago they voted for a man named Barack Hussein Obama.
Tammy, your thoughts on that?
Look, and she uses it right there. She says some other. Casting immediately everyone else as the other. Now, look, this is why it's not working and why Senator Harris is troubled. The Harvard-Harris poll showed a 10-point boost of approval for the president by Hispanics.
Yep.
And Rasmussen is showing last year the president was at 15% approval amongst African Americans. Today he's at 29%. So you're looking at a trajectory where groups that have been protected are saying, wait a minute. We are the same. The money is the same. The amount of money that we're getting from the tax cuts. We've got a job that's actually not delivering pizza. It's actually a real good professional job.
When have African Americans been protected? I mean, we're getting shot in the street by police with no accountability. Where are we being protected?
I think.
Well, that's the C block, Richard.
And that's not true, by the way. There's a lot of accountability.
Right.
Eric Garner was choked to death.
Why don't you look at the research? Look at the research. Look at the research of who's doing the shooting, Richard.
We'll get a chance.
You can slip that in, but
very good example right now with those numbers for African Americans. We immediately go to fear and victimhood. That's what we're rejecting.
Oh, because I'm very fearful when I get pulled over by the police. I'm very fearful.
All right. So here's the bottom line. We're talking about identity politics. Let's say you want to have a discussion with somebody about identity politics, and you say, I'm willing to listen to you, and I want to know, and I agree with you. What do you get? You don't get the answer because it's never enough. The idea of identity politics is that as you are the oppressor and they are the oppressed, so there's actually no end in sight. So if you say, will you take our help? I would like to help you with this. That will not be enough. If you see any public disturbance between either with Antifa or activists, these are people who are not interested in the discussion. All right? So that's why people say when they were talking about identity politics, they can't have a discussion because it never ends. They're never happy. The identity politics is not about solutions. All right? It's about undoing civilization,
Greg,
and especially in capitalism in America.
Antifa's the red herring because that same argument we made about the KKK. They're not trying to have a discussion with me about how to be less racist.
I agree with you there. So Antifa is like the KKK.
But
that's not a red herring.
If you talk to everyday African Americans, they would say, or you talk to everyday brown folks, they would say, high-quality neighborhood public schools, investments in our community, opportunities in our community.
Every American says that.
Exactly.
Every
and
American
that's what we're fighting.
that.
And we're still fighting for that in the African American community.
Everybody's fighting for it.
We're all fighting for it.
Let's get Jesse here. I want to ask Jesse one last thing, which is that President Trump, he has a way of basically disrupting everything. So you have Republicans across the country trying to lower expectations going into Ohio 12 tomorrow so that they could hopefully, beat expectation. He says he's just... Forget all that. He's raising expectations and expecting a red wave in November.
They need a red wall because it shouldn't be this close here in Ohio. This is a district that they've won, the Republicans, I think, for decades, going back to the 30s. Now it's tied. The Democrats running away from Nancy Pelosi. He's keeping it on kitchen table issues, education costs and health care costs. And he doesn't even really mention Donald Trump that much. The Republican is a little bit older, not as charismatic. So he's got a little personality problem there. And now the national media is coming in big time. They started going positive and touting the president's success. And now they're just smearing this Democrat. They're linking him to Elizabeth Warren, calling her Pocahontas. They're going dirty late, so that means they're worried about it. But I think the Republican's going to hang on, but if the Democrat does win, it's going to give the Democrats a lot of momentum going into the midterms.
And get this, no matter what happens tomorrow, they both run again against each other in November. So we'll be back talking about Ohio 12. President Trump continuing to attack the media, and his new tweet is creating all kinds of controversy. Next.
Plant the flowers, I'll plant the kisses. Baby, let's get right down to business. I'll hang the picture.
President Trump taking aim at the media yet again with a new round of blistering attacks this weekend.
What we've done is, they even say, it really has been, as you say, amazing. It's been a miracle to a lot of people. It's been a miracle because I campaigned. And I purposely didn't mention the kind of numbers that we're achieving because I didn't want to be accused of exaggeration, right? By the fake news media. They're so dishonest. These are among the most dishonest human beings you will ever meet.
The president also whipping up media hysteria with this tweet, quote, "Fake news reporting, a complete fabrication that I am concerned about the meeting my wonderful son, Donald, had in Trump Tower. This was a meeting to get information on an opponent, totally legal and done all the time in politics. And it went nowhere. I did not know about it." Many in the press are claiming it's a stunning admission. But, as some have pointed out, Trump's tweet isn't that different from what he said a year ago.
I think from a practical standpoint, most people would have taken that meeting. It's called opposition research or even research into your opponent. I've had many people, I have only been in politics for 2 years, but I've had many people call up, oh, gee, we have information on this factor or this person or, frankly, Hillary. That's very standard in politics.
All right, Dan, I was reading the Washington Post over the weekend, and Mark Thiessen had a great column.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to bring this
What
to
section
Richard's
of the paper is he in, Jesse?
attention. That would be A2. The column ran in A2. And he asked this question. He said, what is the difference between what Donald Jr. did at the Trump Tower meeting and what Hillary Clinton did? And one of the main differences, he points out, is that Hillary Clinton actively solicited Russian dirt on an opponent by paying that cutout in Britain to get it from Russian sources. Donald Trump Jr. didn't solicit anything. The Russians came to him. Do you see the difference there?
No, I don't see the difference at all. Here's
How
why.
could you not, Richard?
Because there was
I drove that right through your head.
No, I think
How simple can I make it?
I think you were more like ships passing in the night because the facts are completely different.
What are the facts? How are they different?
Even in the emails that
How are they different?
I'm getting ready to tell you if you'll allow me to do it.
I'm ready to listen.
Great. This is wonderful. So even in the emails that Don Jr. released, there was somebody who was like, we have somebody from who's connected to Putin, who's a lawyer in the Kremlin, and she has all this information on Hillary. Would you meet with her?
And he
at
said
that
yes.
particular point, yes. And at that particular point in time, that's where it becomes illegal. This happened.
What is the law that's being broken?
Well, it's first of all, you cannot accept contributions of any kind from foreign entities. That's what the federal statute says.
Did he accept them?
In accepting the meeting, one would argue. I'm not a lawyer.
The meeting is not information,
But
and the law
I'm going to
clearly
give you an
states,
example.
because I have the law
I'm
right
glad
here.
you brought the law.
52 U.S. Code 301-121. Nothing about meetings. It is about a donation or a contribution.
Yes,
and
but there could be in-kind
what came of the meeting? Zilch, Richard, zilch. There's no crime there.
But here,
Tammy,
let me make a point.
How right am I?
Wait.
Am I right, Tammy, or am I right?
Well, yeah, look, here's what this has been the entire argument. This does happen all the time, right? The big difference is, well, obviously it's happened twice here. You've got a meeting with people looking for dirt, but then you've got the DNC, as you've noted, paying money for information from the Russians. While her husband is getting a $500,000 paycheck for a Russian speech, while she is making deals to give 20% of our uranium to Russia as well.
There's so much falsehood.
But here's what has been, I think, a very good point over the weekend as well, that all of this pointing at Donald Trump is about really projection. That it's all of the things that the Democrats have been doing with the Russians within that framework to distract from that. It's a typical tactic. You accuse your opponent of what you've been doing so that nobody turns around to look at you.
So, Dana, what do you think?
That's what's happening.
What do you think about the latest iteration of the Trump Jr. Tower scandal?
I just maybe it's exactly what the president said last year, but it's not what Sekulow, his lawyer, said. And this weekend he had to say, I was given bad information. I passed along bad information. And he won't elaborate, but that seems to be a recurring problem in this situation.
He threw himself under the bus.
Correct?
I am a broken record. I was actually going to write down I'm a broken record. I saw that. This is, if I were home watching this, my head would explode because I would not care. And especially if I were a retired executive who worked in business, who probably took a half a dozen different meetings a day in your building. And I've said this myself as an editor of a number of magazines. I took meetings with people I didn't even know, or I sent people to meetings. It wasn't a big deal. You didn't care. Somebody come back and turn out, yeah, that guy turned out to be a drug dealer. I didn't know he was a drug dealer. He said he wanted to buy advertising. People have meetings all the time. They send their lowly assistants or whoever is around to these meetings. It drives me crazy that this is something that is somehow bigger than an actual candidate buying dirt sight unseen from the Russians through a British spy. That this getting a 20-minute meeting that you don't even give a damn about is somehow. But it also gets me about the media. A lot of these people have never worked in business before, so they don't understand this. But they make phone calls to you. A reporter will make a phone call to you to tell you or ask you about dirt about your coworker. All right? They are doing the same exact kind of thing. Every reporter that has written a thing about the media has done this kind of thing.
No one's calling you about dirt on me, right?
But to your point about people not caring, Gallup
didn't say no.
Everybody takes the call, Jesse.
You guys, but you literally are right about people not caring. Gallup did the list about the most important issue you're facing and what you care about. Russia didn't even, it got an asterisk.
Yes.
Below everything else in the world.
They care more about Jesse's hair. We proved this.
And look, it's fabulous.
Against my better judgment, I'm going to give Richard a short last word. Short.
So I'll be very brief.
An apology?
This is not a business. This is actually a campaign, and campaigns are governed by laws. The law says you can't take foreign contributions. It's been done every time a foreign entity has come to a campaign. They've usually called the FBI in 2000 when it happened to the Al Gore campaign.
So why did they? How come they didn't do it?
They immediately called the FBI. What Don Jr. should have done.
Should have.
The FBI.
How come he didn't?
This would have been a non-story.
No, let me ask you. Why do you think he didn't? No. Why do you? Why do you think he didn't? He didn't know. They're not politicians, Richard. They're not politicians. They're businessmen. They take meetings.
Ignorance of the law is not a defense.
No, it actually is a defense in this case because they didn't know.
It's never a defense.
And you know who did know? The FBI.
You're so
they
pure.
didn't tell the Trump campaign, did they?
And lastly, Clinton paid for Russian dirt. Don Jr.
And they knew. And they knew.
That was for the tease.
Imagine if she'd won.
Deafening silence from liberals after a wave of gun violence sweeps Chicago this weekend.
It belongs to him. I'm on up for the rising.
Alrighty, a shocking level of violence this weekend in Chicago. Police say 11 people were killed and dozens more were shot over the 3-day span. Democrat Mayor Rahm Emanuel is partially blaming the number of firearms on the streets despite the city's tough regulations.
There are too many guns on the street, too many people with criminal records on the street, and there is a shortage of values about what is right, what is wrong.
Well, meanwhile, the typical liberal outrage is mostly non-existent here. Should we be surprised? And, you know, a lot of people with that statement, the heads were crashing onto the desks because it was kind of didn't make a lot of sense. Greg?
Well, what I noticed was earlier Giuliani made a mistake, right? He inverted the injuries and the murders so that I think he said that 59 people were murdered, and so what I noticed from that was that Giuliani's mistake in his numbers got more press in the media than the actual deaths, which I think you said were 8 or 9 or 11 or that. Yeah.
11.
So the mistake that Giuliani made was more outrageous to the people that have been ignoring what's been unfolding in Chicago for years. That this is actually the stories that Giuliani screwed up. Not
that's the distraction.
So I'm starting to think, well, maybe Giuliani actually by screwing up did Chicago a favor because finally people are actually talking about it. The fact is, there are some major flaws in the media about this. One, they need a singular spectacle, mass shooting or a missing teen. But this just keeps gang violence because it's a continually unfolding event. They just treat it like the weather, like 69 and cloudy, 54 injured, you know, in one area. And because it's in a cordoned off area of Chicago, the wealthy don't have to worry about it. The politicians don't have to worry about it. They don't care. And you know, you've got problems with sentencing. People are on the street. You got to deal with this stuff. But you know what? As long as it keeps going and it doesn't bother them, it's okay.
Plus, if they want to talk about it, they'd have to discuss what a solution is. And they think they've applied the solution, which is the banning of guns, making guns virtually impossible to get. But so it's gang activity and gang violence. Dana,
I didn't hear that as just the only solution today from them. I mean, the chief of police was talking about the breakdown of trust between the police and the people.
Right.
And Rahm Emanuel talks about that there's a lack of values. That's not a government solution.
No.
Like, he's not saying that there's like a magic government solution that can happen. Like, that's actually a conservative position.
Yeah, but remember what was his... This is the guy who went after Chick-fil-A over values.
I know, I get it. I know that. This is obviously a lot more important than Chick-fil-A, and they have a huge problem there. But I don't think that they're blind to it. And I think that the new chief of police also, he said that they're going to be conducting these coordinated enforcement missions. Like, they need our help, not our condemnation. And so I hope that the president has offered to help Chicago. I hope that Mayor Emanuel will take him up on it, because people, one of the reasons that not more people died is because our trauma surgeons are really good.
Yeah, it's a sobering fact.
That is a fact. And, but they should be able to not have to do that on the weekend.
Yeah, it would be in the 70s. The numbers would be
59.
Yeah, it would. Yeah.
This is really we do get very upset, understandably, about the horror of a mass shooting. This is like a mass shooting every weekend, and we do just kind of avoid it because maybe we've gotten used to it. Is that part of the problem? Why media ignores it? Because they just generally do.
Well, the media needs a villain in a case like this, and they can't have Rahm be the villain because he's a Democrat and he's protected, and they can't have an anonymous gang member be a villain because that doesn't fit the bill, and it is like the weather, but like Greg said, but they found their villain and it's Rudy Giuliani. So what they could do, and there's an opportunity for the media to do, is treat this like a real humanitarian crisis, like a hurricane or like a school shooting. They flood the zone with TV reporters, they bring an anchor to Chicago, they send undercover people, they talk with local pastors and leadership, and they can really shine a spotlight on something like that. And what that will do, it will hold the mayor accountable, it will shame local politicians into actually doing something, and it might bring more philanthropists and charity, athletes and celebrities into Chicago and see if we can fix this mess, because it's really sad.
Yeah, and of course we're looking at, everyone generally agrees, we're dealing with gang shootings. You just drive by and shoot into gatherings, especially during the summer. You can shoot a lot of people all at once there, so we've got a gang problem. Is this why we're still dealing with this and there's no major national outrage?
Well, I think to some extent I agree with Dana. I agree with Jesse a little bit in that I think this should be a main media story, because what's happening in the streets of Chicago is a genocide. One of our colleagues, Gianno Codwell, has been on the ground there for a couple of days covering what's happening there. But I think to say that the liberals have been silent is a farce, because thousands of people in Chicago have been protesting and been talking about the lack of security and for the people and the lack of opportunity. You cannot solve gangs without dealing with the root cause. And to deal the root cause of gangs is because there's no opportunity in these communities. Right. These young men have nothing to do. The schools are not working as well as they should because they're not being properly funded by the mayor, and thus they see the gangs, they see them as role models, and they've joined gangs.
There haven't been
so we've got to deal with the fact that there's no opportunity, and we've also got to deal with what Dana brought up is a breakdown of trust between the community and police. Part of it was because of Laquan McDonald, who was shot 16 times by the police, and there was a cover-up with the mayor involved where they paid the family off, and nobody saw the tapes until it was finally pushed to be out. But there's people that are doing good work, and we've got to, help them, and we've got to get to the root problem.
We've touched, I think, on all of the things that we need to deal with, and obviously this is going to continue here. Now, up next, Greg breaks down how an alleged drone attack on the Venezuelan president could be a new frontier in terrorism.
Ain't that America? Something to see.
All right. A drone attack broke up Venezuelan President Maduro's speech on Saturday. Here's tape of his soldiers reacting heroically to the attack.
Wow. Pizza
Looks like they spotted Air Force One. So 2 points to learn from this. First, Venezuela is a socialist paradise that was once rich, meaning if you like Bernie, this could be your future. Someone should page Alexandria and the Democrats. Hyperinflation, depression, human rights violations, food shortages. There's your happy tomorrow. You too could eat your own zoo animals. Your currency could be worth less than toilet paper, except you couldn't buy toilet paper. Play your Bernie card right and your medicine could vanish, your hospitals close, and for safety, you could do what Venezuelans do, move to Colombia. Think it can't happen? Venezuela was once the most prosperous country in South America before they traded it all in for a dime store socialist. The point of socialism? To find something good made by somebody else, take it for yourself. It's shoplifting as a political theory. You convince poor people to give up everything they have, to beat the crap out of them if they ask for it back. They've been doing this for a century now. Socialism is even older than Bernie, and it doesn't work either. Second thing, the attack was by drone, equipped with C4. I've been talking about this forever. Terror married to Amazon technology. It's a new scary reality. You can fret about it. The experts are already there. They don't want to ban socialists. They want to ban drones. Frankly, you can't ban either. But any smarty pants knows which one is worse. Dana, I've sat here and I said technology in terror is the next wave. And we have to be, I've said it since the early 70s when the Five first started. Remember that?
Yes, it's been good working with you.
We're up on almost our 50th year, and I tell you, your surgery, you look just like you look just like you did when the show started.
Yeah, I mean, it's been it's amazing. It's reverse aging.
Well, anyway, you get my point.
Yes, I do get your point. Mary Anastasia O'Grady, I'm sure you read her column today in the Wall Street Journal, Jesse.
After the Washington Post.
She said that for Maduro, if you want to murder Maduro, you need to get in line, because there are so many people who think his leadership has been exactly how you just described it. It has absolutely destroyed a country. But also she said another thing, which is that Cuba is basically controlling this country. So everyone is basically dealing with a situation where, remember, during the Obama administration, he tried to make that overture, try to change everything. It didn't actually work, because you can't just make an overture without making recommendations or insisting on changes, and you won't get any of those changes. And then the drone thing, I'll let other people talk about that, but it's scary, as you know what.
Richard, you said, we were talking about this in the break, I'm very pro-drone, but I do think, and you are too, but because drones save lives in war, you use fewer soldiers, and the collateral damage is less. But the downside is, other people can have drones and use it for evil. So where do you stand on this?
So I'm okay with when we use drones in high combat situations where our men and women, our veterans, our current armed forces are at risk, right? So in situations like Iraq and the Battle of Fallujah, if we had more drones, there'd be less American deaths. I'm against drones when they're used for surveillance purposes, when they're used to surveil Americans, when they're used to surveil, like, you know, that type of thing. But the ideal of having drones in war zones where we can have people sitting in Omaha, Nebraska managing our drones, that's great, because then we don't lose valuable American lives.
Yeah, I agree.
That's going to naturally move to robots then, too. We were talking about this, that why keep it in the air, why not just send, you know, the robots to go do, you know, the action. And so it's still going to be the end result is somebody's going to die.
But more efficiently. The great thing about technology is that they don't sleep. They don't get distracted, and you have them facing your target.
But the operator will, to some degree. And then
you have 60 for a drone.
The thing about Venezuela, there's a concern that, in fact, this was not something that was done from the outside, that he was doing this himself. And I think the big surprise was that the military reacted the way they did. So if you find that there's military people suddenly disappearing, a couple of generals,
who they are?
You'll know what happened.
I can't blame them. I mean, does the military want to defend a failing, dying system? I don't know, Jesse.
Not
your
the
thoughts?
Greatest military discipline I've seen on display right there. Oh my
yeah,
God.
that was hot. There
Not
you go.
a good look.
Somebody's going to
embolden the Colombians. They're just going to take over Venezuela.
But you know, you bring up, okay, more people, I read this fact, I hope it's right, that more people are fleeing Venezuela than people are fleeing Syria.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's no one really left to leave Syria.
Yeah,
that's number one. But
and the people that are fleeing Venezuela aren't coming to America and talking about how great socialism is. That's for sure. I think this was the scariest monologue that you ever did.
Really?
I'm actually terrified of this. If you have a jihadist in the United States, and he straps some munition to some jerry-rigged drone that he bought off the internet, goes and flies it over a football game, how are you going to prevent that?
When did you start watching the five?
I've been saying that.
I don't listen to all your monologues.
You know, it might have been before you got, but the idea of a drone married to a bioagent, say anthrax, flying it over a football field, you can kill thousands.
That's right. So when the news first broke on Saturday, the first thing I did is forward it to Greg, and I said, "Here we go," because we didn't know what it was. I do think it could be possible that Maduro set this up for himself, because what did they have today? They had rallies of support for him today, and he needs that because internally people are mad at him.
And there was no extended security zone for him. There was no extra, coverage for expecting.
No, you're forgetting about the jackets they were holding up over his
face. The Kevlar jackets. No, I mean, I think when we have our president out, you put him in like a little cage, the bulletproof cage that they're in, even when they get during the inauguration. So clearly they weren't prepared for this drone coming.
All right. A musician's flight ends on a sour note. Very clever, producer. Very clever.
We all know how frustrating it can be to fly. For example, an American Airlines passenger got kicked off the flight because of the size of her cello. The outraged musician says she was booted after the crew claimed the plane was too small for her $30,000 instrument, even though she had already bought a seat. The airline calls it a miscommunication. Our very own fellow Fiver Greg posted an interesting tweet about his trip back from Texas this weekend. Flights can be delayed at times indefinitely because people flush things down the toilet that shouldn't be flushed. Don't be that person.
What happened?
Greg, who was that person?
Well, first, the solution is for anybody, for the woman, play the flute. You save so much money. It's a tiny little instrument, and actually it's more enjoyable than the cello. Oh, I had a great flight. It was fantastic. The people, I'm always against people tweeting against airlines because I think it's petty. That's why I didn't mention the airline.
Right.
Somebody flushed something down the toilet, and that delayed a flight. We always think, okay, what delays flights? There's so many variables, but the number one thing is always weather. But you don't consider the 1,000 variables. And in this case, it was somebody, never flush anything down that's larger than a cocktail weenie. It's my rule for everything.
That's a good rule.
It's a good rule.
I'm one of those people that tweet the airlines because I think airlines should have good customer service. You spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars for tickets. I was on a recent flight to Israel, and they were 12 hours delayed, and I'm like, 12-hour delay? Is that even possible?
But they're looking out for you. It could be weather. Could be weather. They're trying to save your life.
Or when they oversell a flight and they're like, oh, we need 5 people to volunteer. Maybe you shouldn't have oversold the flight.
I think that people across the board, you had a good flight yesterday.
Yeah.
A lot of people, we get where we need to go, but I think across the board, people are super frustrated with the airlines, or with the actual planes, with the delays, with the overselling, with the cost of it all. And people want to go get where they're going, and they're extremely frustrated. I knew somebody who tried to get to Milwaukee for a bachelor party, but they ended up sending them down to Richmond. Like, well, how do we get to Milwaukee? And they said, well, you can't until Monday. So they missed the whole reason they left anyway and had to take a 6-hour train back.
You know, one of the big things, too, I think that's hurting how people view airlines are the animal issues. There are so many stories about the animals not making it. That becomes a problem. But then there's a very basic kind of thing. I was on a flight in business class, asked for a blanket where you're supposed to get one. Flight attendant took it out of the overhead and threw it at me.
Ooh.
And one other flight, which was...
You should tweet the airline.
Well, I tweeted at that point, and I tweeted about this other airline. It was so cold that, and everyone was complaining, this one flight attendant brought literally a water bottle with hot water in it. Like
that works. I do that every day.
Yeah, but this is like handing it to us. It was just not the best customer service, and you do expect at least to have, you know, some kind of at least not frozen air when you're flying.
Here's what I think. People need to take flying much more seriously. It's a sport, okay? It's an athletic event. There's a lot of people that are trying to get on the flight quickly, and you have people not paying attention. They're on their phones. They can't find their tickets.
Bags.
Their bags are this way. Their kids are this way. This is like, once that flight opens up, you have your ticket ready, you scan it, you go. All right? And then you find your seat fast, boom, you sit, buckle, blanket, overhead, don't talk to anybody else. Don't go to the bathroom, nothing.
I agree.
Stop bothering other people and holding everything up.
Jesse, we're agreeing more these days. We're hanging out too much in America.
What do you
We're hanging out too much.
You remember that when a woman was not allowed on the plane because their children were in leggings? Do you think there's too much put on that about how you appear, how you're dressed? The girl was in leggings, and they wouldn't let her on the plane because she was on the voucher. She was like on a buddy system ticket. Oh. Do you think people should dress better when they get on planes? Because that's another issue.
So there used to be a time where you had to dress up to get on the planes, but now it's 2018, and you can wear whatever the hell you want.
You know, it's sad. Okay, because it's more affordable to fly. More people are flying. It's a bus in the sky. That's what it is. It's a bus in the sky, and therefore people are dressing. But people are dressing like slobs everywhere. Sweatpants are replacing khakis, I
have to admit something.
What?
I have now transitioned from dressing nice on flights to sweatpants and sneakers.
There you go.
I did it for comfort.
Sweatpants?
That's what I wear on
That's stylish sweatpants.
Sweatpants and a hoodie.
Because that's how bad the flights are. You want some comfort, you're going to have to get it for yourself.
The only thing I think airlines could do that would make life great is if they had a children's-only section in the back of the plane. So all the kids and the families sit in the back of the plane, and those business travelers who don't want to hear the kids can sit in the front.
All right. I'm excited about my one more thing, so let's go.
One more thing's up next. We all know how frustrating it can be to fly. For example, an American Airlines passenger got kicked off the flight because of the size of her cello. The outraged musician says she was booted after the crew claimed the plane was too small for her $30,000 instrument, even though she had already bought a seat. The airline calls it a miscommunication. Our very own fellow Fiver Greg posted an interesting tweet about his trip back from Texas this weekend. Flights can be delayed at times indefinitely because people flush things down the toilet that shouldn't be flushed. Don't be that person.
Mm-hmm. What happened?
Greg, who was that person?
Well, first, the solution is for anybody, for the woman, play the flute. You save so much money. It's a tiny little instrument, and actually it's more enjoyable than the cello. Oh, I had a great flight. It was fantastic. The people at, I'm always against people tweeting against airlines because I think it's petty. That's why I didn't mention the airline.
Right.
Somebody flushed something down the toilet, and that delayed a flight. We always think, okay, what delays flights? There's so many variables, but the number one thing is always weather. But you don't consider the 1,000 variables. And in this case, it was somebody, never flush anything down that's larger than a cocktail weenie. It's my rule for everything.
That's a good rule.
It's a good rule.
I'm one of those people that tweet the airlines because I think airlines should have good customer service. You spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars for tickets. I was on a recent flight to Israel, and they were 12 hours delayed, and I'm like, 12-hour delay? Is that even possible?
But they're looking out for you. It could be weather. Could be weather. They're trying to save your life.
Or when they oversell a flight and they're like, oh, we need 5 people to volunteer. Maybe you shouldn't have oversold the flight.
I think that people, across the board, you had a good flight yesterday.
Yeah.
A lot of people, we get where we need to go, but I think across the board, people are super frustrated with the airlines, or with the actual planes, with the delays, with the overselling, with the cost of it all. And people want to go get where they're going, and they're extremely frustrated. I knew somebody who tried to get to Milwaukee for a bachelor party, but they ended up sending them down to Richmond. They're like, well, how did we get to Milwaukee? And they said, well, you can't until Monday. So they missed the whole reason they left anyway and had to take a 6-hour train back.
You know, one of the big things, too, I think that's hurting how people view airlines are the animal issues. There are so many stories about the animals not making it. That becomes a problem. But then there's a very basic kind of thing. I was on a flight in business class, asked for a blanket where you're supposed to get one. Flight attendant took it out of the overhead and threw it at me.
Ooh.
And one other flight, which was...
You should have tweeted the airline.
I tweeted at that point, and I tweeted about this other airline. It was so cold that, and everyone was complaining, this one flight attendant brought literally a water bottle with hot water in it. Like
that works. I do that every day.
Yeah, but this is like handing it to us. It was just not the best customer service, and you do expect at least to have, you know, some kind of at least not frozen air when you're flying.
Here's what I think. People need to take flying much more seriously. It's a sport, okay? It's an athletic event. There's a lot of people that are trying to get on the flight quickly, and you have people not paying attention. They're on their phones. They can't find their tickets.
Bags.
Their bags are this way. Their kids are this way. This is like, once that flight opens up, you have your ticket ready, you scan it, you go, all right? And then you find your seat fast, boom, you sit, buckle, blanket, overhead, don't talk to anybody else. Don't go to the bathroom, nothing.
I agree.
Stop bothering other people and holding everything up.
Jesse, we're agreeing more these days. We're hanging out too much, America.
What do you agree?
We're hanging out too much.
You remember that when a woman was not allowed on the plane because their children were in leggings? Do you think there's too much put on that about how you appear, how you're dressed? The girl was in leggings, and they wouldn't let her on the plane because she was on the voucher. She was like on a buddy system ticket. Oh. Do you think people should dress better when they get on planes? Because that's another issue.
So there used to be a time where you had to dress up to get on the planes, but now it's 2018, and you can wear whatever the hell
you know, it's sad. Okay, because it's more affordable to fly. More people are flying. It's a bus in the sky. That's what it is. It's a bus in the sky, and therefore people are dressing. But people are dressing like slobs everywhere. Sweatpants are replacing khakis, I
have to admit something.
What?
I have now transitioned from dressing nice on flight